Okay, first thing we're going to do is we're going to prep the meat and the fat. So got a pretty cheap jewel steak here. Didn't want it for its marbling because I'm going to be adding my own fat into the burger mix. But at this point, I just wanted something that would have good beef flavor, so I'm getting the I'm grabbing the this cheap old steak that you would get at Jewel because it'll be fine for burger. And then I've got a bunch of Wagyu fat and prime steak fat. And first thing we're going to do is prep all of this stuff and then do some weighing. So we're going to get started with that. Get this steak out of the package here. Get rid of this thing. Then first off, I really want to get rid of all of this fat and any kind of sinew because I really just want the meat on this. So let's get that removed. I'm going to get back this cat meat is going to be good, but first thing I'm going to do is get rid of this just so I can work with the pieces. This thing is overall about 1 pound. We're going to lose enough of it to bring that down, but that's okay. I'm really just kind of testing this out. I want to get rid of, testing out this process. I want to get rid of all of this connective tissue. I'll keep this piece of meat here because that'll be fine for grinding, but the rest of it not so much. Then get rid of some of this other junk fat and sinew. So kind of want to get at that stuff and get rid of this here. Just trimming it all down, and then when we're done, I'll weigh it. Get rid of some of this stuff that won't really grind up well. Let's break this down here. I'm going to trim that off, and I'm not being super careful on this, but we should be okay there. So these ought to be good. This stuff ought to look fine. Then again, want to get this cap because this is good meat on the rib steak. So I want to just get rid of that. We're gonna get rid of some of this weird stuff here that isn't going to grind up well. Some of this is alright, so I don't need to go too nuts with it. And then this stuff, a little too much effort here to deal with that. So we're going to lose that. Lose a little bit of this. I really wanted to get a sirloin steak, but they didn't have any at the store I went through, but they had this rib steak on special and it'll be just fine. So just kind of break that down, get rid of this stuff, break this off, and again, I'm going to get rid of some of this connective stuff that's not really, it's usually good on a good piece of meat. This is because it's from Jewel, it's kind of a questionable piece of meat, but it'll taste like beef, and that's the main thing that we want with the burger. This is okay, I'm not really a fan of that, but let's get rid of some of that. That's kind of silver skin, so we'll ditch that. This stuff is actually, I don't know, I'm not really digging on this either, so we're gonna trim that off. I think I'm just gonna cut this into pieces here, and I think we'll be all right on that. So, okay, so with the meat, and overall I want to break this down into like 1-inch pieces. So we're going to do some of that. Just get this thing, start to chop it, because we're going to grind this in the food processor. So I want smaller pieces. Ultimately, we're going to get a coarse grind, which I think is going to be better for a good tender burger. So, getting this broken down. All of this is going into garbage right there, but for the time being, just going to keep it like that. Got little pieces here that I've already processed. Oops, I don't like any of that crapola. So that's going away. And as is this. So there. Alright, we get rid of that. I can, I don't know, I'm probably being too meticulous, but let's just do it that way. Get rid of that. This looks fine. This piece here, move this stuff around. That out of the way so you can actually see this. Let's break this thing down into these little pieces. There's that, and we'll nail this bad boy in half, and so there we have it. So what we're gonna do now is I'm gonna break out before I cut up this fat that I have here. I want to know how much meat I have, and then work the math so that I ultimately end up with a 75-25 burger blend. So we're gonna stop this for right now, and then we'll go to the next step. Okay, next step we got here. Got out the kitchen scale, put a little plastic bag over this thing, just to keep the scale from getting contaminated with the raw meat. Set this thing 2 ounces. Not sure how well it's coming across the camera, but right now it's at ounces. I've done a tare on it so that I'm at 0. Now I just want to see how much meat I actually have here. So we're going to go ahead and pile that baby up. And according to the whoops, piece of it fell off. So according to the display here, which I'm not sure is rendering well in the camera, we've got 11¼ ounces of meat. So that's good, because I ultimately want to end up with about a pound of meat. So what I'm gonna, or a pound of burger. So that's going to be good. Then I'll end up adding another, I don't know, 4 or 5 ounces of fat, and that'll come out to the right number. So time to start dealing with the fat. All right, what we're going to do here is start to deal with the fat. So as I said, I've got a bunch of fat that came off of trimmings from both Wagyu and from some prime. So they're still kind of frozen, but that'll be okay. So what I need to do here is to try to get myself about 4 ounces. This particular piece is just short of 4 ounces, so it's going to be close enough. Try to move the camera over so we can see that. And if you can see that, it says 3.8 ounces, close enough for government work. So we're going to go with this. All right, so we're back to it. So this, like I said, this fat is frozen. I'm going to want to take this thing down as much as possible and really get it rendered. I'll probably, before I grind it, go ahead and thaw it out. But right now, what I want to do is get this stuff pretty well chopped up. I want this a lot more chopped than the, I'm going to get rid of that piece. I want this a lot more chopped than the meat pieces, because I really want to make sure that when this stuff is in the food processor, that it really kind of incorporates well, grinds up well. So I'm going to take these pieces down into small, like almost like 1/2 inch cubes. So just keep chopping. Chop that chunk up. Again, not really sure whether this was prime or Wagyu, and the one thing you can kind of tell with Wagyu is as soon as it starts to get some heat on it, it starts to liquefy, which you don't really see with prime or choice, or you know, more domestic cows. So don't really know. Either way, it's going to be good. It'll be good eating. All right. Based on some of the pieces of meat I'm seeing on this, I think this is probably the Wagyu, which is fine. That's what I wanted anyway, but just when I put it in the bag, I just kind of mixed it all together. All right. So that's it. We got the fat that we need. This is like some junk, so we're going to get rid of that. And we've got the meat, so the next step is going to be run it through the grinder. All right, so we're back. It's been a little over 20 minutes. We've got our just short of 12 ounces of meat. This is ribeye steak. That was choice, barely from the Jewel. And then we've got our almost 4 ounces of fat that I took off of a couple of other steaks earlier. This is again, as I said, this is either prime or Wagyu. So we will see. Either way, it's going to be yummy. So now's the time we're going to move on to getting this ground up, and we're going to do that using the food processor. So we've got the food processor here. I'm going to adjust the camera. All right, so what I've heard is that the right way to do this is to do it in about half-pound chunks. So actually that works out well. We're going to take 50% of the meat that we have, add that to the food processor, and then about 50% of the fat as well. Going to do that. So ultimately we should end up with a good juicy burger. Just getting a little bit more fat in there. I think that's about right. And then let's get this thing added on. And then what we're going to do is 10 to 15 pulses. So let's get that rolling. About 1 second pulses. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now it is grinding, but you know what I'm noticing is that the fat is not really incorporating, but that's okay. I think what we're going to end up doing is doing that when we ultimately we take and bring this stuff together. So I think I'm going to want a little bit more here. I've got the small pieces, but I think what I'm going to want is just a little bit more. So we've done 10. We're going to do 5 more. 4, 5. All right, I'm liking that. I'm liking what I'm seeing on this. We've got nicely ground together. I think we're going to be okay there. This fat probably should have been cut smaller, so I'm not sure how well that's going to incorporate, but once we actually make the burger, we should be okay. So, all right, so we're going to rotate to the next stuff. Okay, it's time for round 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So let's pull that apart, and we've got a good grind. The fat's getting somewhat incorporated, but it's going to need a little bit more help with that, but that's okay. I think once it cooks, it's going to be in great shape. Whoop, let's actually put that on camera there. So I like the way that's looking. So we're set with the grind. All right, then here's what we have. We've got our almost 1 pound of ground meat. Yeah, the fat is not as incorporated as you ultimately see in store-bought stuff, but we're going to make sure that that is equally distributed when we make our burgers, and that's the next step. All right, it's time to make the burgers. Now I'm just going to, you could weigh this, make sure they're exactly the same weight, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to pull this together and grab about what I think is about 50% of what I have, and I'm going to take this, got a parchment lined sheet just so the stuff doesn't all stick together, and what I'm doing here is just kind of getting all of this together. I'm going to get this formed properly, get it the right shape and size. Yeah, it looks pretty fatty on the outside there, but fat equal flavor, so that'll render down nicely when we're cooking that. Ultimately going to cook it on a cast iron pan to give it a good sear, and then finish it in the oven at about 300 until it is a medium rare. So I think we're good there. Let's leave that. Let's give it a go on the rest of this and hope that I was roughly right with the sizing. Because it's a rough chop, it's not very sticky, so it didn't really form a lot of the chemical that actually causes it to be sticky. But I'd rather have less of that than more of that, because that would then make it a tougher burger. So here we go. We've got this. I think we're roughly in the right ballpark with the size. So these are gonna cook up well. They're thick. Those are gonna be good. These should be some pretty good burgers. Again, good fat content, and I think we're going to really like this. So, first time doing it. Let's see what happens. We're going to go ahead and throw these in the fridge, let them set up a bit, and then they'll be ready for cooking later. All right.